Hello my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 build guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're covering my pick for the best Cleric in Baldur's Gate 3. This is an update video to my previous video of the same name, which is the most popular video on my channel, but was done almost 6 months ago, and contained some information that is no longer true because of patches and various other things that I wanted to update. So I wanted to cover this topic again in order to really modernize that build guide and bring it into the Honor Mode era, as well as updating it for things that we've learned over the last 6 months of Baldur's Gate. This will be a guide to my pick for the best Cleric build and the best Shadowheart build in Baldur's Gate 3. Should be excellent for your Honor Mode playthroughs, as well as for any lower difficulty playthroughs that you're intending to do. This is also important, I think, because I, of course, have been building Honor Mode party guides for everyone, and I wanted a build guide to link to for a Cleric build because, spoilers, Clerics feature pretty heavily in optimized Honor Mode parties. Before we begin, let's talk a little bit about Cleric as a class, because I think Cleric is actually pretty widely misunderstood. At first glance, it looks like it's purely intended to be a support class. You have healing, you have supporting spells, and that is an element that Clerics bring to the table, but they actually do so much more than that. Clerics are one of the most well-rounded and powerful classes in Dungeons & Dragons, providing just about everything that a character needs to a party. You get to tank, you get to do damage, you get to control enemy movement, you get to support your allies, and you also do indeed get to heal. But all of those things together make Clerics an incredibly powerful character that brings basically everything that a party could need in a single package. Shadowheart gets a little bit of a bad rap, I think, because her default setup is somewhat weak, but we can optimize that and make her a core member of an optimized party by increasing the power of her build. So let's get into that and make one of the most powerful characters in the entire game, the Cleric. I'm of course using Shadowheart as the example character here, but Clerics also make excellent main characters, of course, so if you want to build a custom character as a Cleric, then some of the best races that work with Clerics are some of the ones that work at best for just about any character build. Wood Elf or Half Wood Elf give you bonus movement speed, which is incredibly powerful for a Cleric, especially because one of the things that we will be doing is dealing damage to enemies just by moving next to them, so the additional movement speed is very helpful. Halfling can allow you to reroll ones, which lets you maintain concentration on your spells much more easily, as well as, of course, just not fail saves or miss attack rolls. And Gnome gets advantage on mental saving throws, which means thanks to your high wisdom, you'll almost never fail a wisdom saving throw, so you'll basically never be mind-controlled or frightened or anything if you're a gnome. Other options are also all viable. It doesn't make an enormous difference, so I would recommend going with whatever you think is most flavorful, but those are some that are more optimal from a mechanical standpoint. For Shadowheart, unfortunately, High Half-Elf isn't amazingly synergistic with a Cleric, because her bonus cantrip that she gets from being a high half-elf is based on her intelligence rather than her wisdom, and we're going to want to reduce our intelligence. This firebolt doesn't actually do anything for us, and the proficiencies that she gets from being a high half-elf are duplicated by her Cleric levels in general anyways, so her race doesn't fit extremely well with her class. Luckily, that's not an enormous penalty, but just a minor anti-synergy to the character that exists. That being said, we can still make her an incredible powerhouse, so let's go ahead and do that. The first things that we need to do are to pick our domain, because that's the most important thing with Cleric, is choosing what kind of Cleric you're going to be. Unlike almost every other class, Cleric gets their subclass at level 1, which gives you an enormous amount of front-loaded power because you get both the powerful class abilities of Cleric and the extremely powerful subclass abilities. Some of these subclasses are better than others, though, and so which one we pick will have a significant impact on how our character is going to come together. These subclasses give you two different things. They give you abilities, which you can see from, like, the Trickery Cleric's Blessing of the Trickster ability, and then she'll get more as you level up. And they also give you access to unique spells, many of which are not normally available to Clerics. So when you're looking at your subclass, your domain for a Cleric, you need to take into account two things. One is how good the abilities are, and two is how good the spells you get are. Does it give you spells that Clerics don't normally get, and how powerful are those spells? Unfortunately, Trickery Domain, Shadowheart's default Cleric Domain, is the weakest of the 7 domains because the abilities are quite weak and the spell access is okay but not amazing. But I think that there are really 2 domains that stand head and shoulders above the others, so I'm going to talk about those 2 in particular, and those are Light Domain and Tempest Domain. Both of them get incredible spell access, giving you access to a bunch of offensive spells, so they add damage that clerics normally don't get access to, but also a ton of utility spells, and both have incredibly powerful subclass abilities as well. Light Domain lets you defend yourself with Warding Flare, and Tempest Domain lets you maximize lightning damage, as well as wear heavy armor and use martial weapons. I think the best, by default, for just sort of a standard cleric that you really just want to do cleric stuff with, is to take Tempest Domain. This gives you access to some of the most powerful spells in the game, in addition to clerics' already incredible spell list, and gives you access to a bunch of extra damage while giving you heavy armor, so you can be as defensively minded as possible, something that clerics really want to do. Tempest Domain clerics get access to some of the very best spells in the game, and almost all of their spells are not already on the cleric spell list, so you really widen your array of options by taking Tempest Domain. So I'm going to recommend that we take Tempest Domain for Shadowheart as her domain, and then we are also going to need to fix her ability scores because she starts with a very bad ability spread with a bunch of odd numbers and a bunch of points put in sort of nonsensical areas, so we definitely need to fix that. We want for her to have at least 16 wisdom, because that's what clerics are based on, and at least 16 constitution, because that increases your hit points and your concentration saves, which are extremely important to have. We also want at least 14 dexterity, because dexterity, while you won't be able to use it for armor class, because we're going to be wearing heavy armor, we will use it for rolling initiative rolls. Going first is incredibly powerful, so almost every character wants extremely high dexterity, and you're going to need to increase this as much as possible. In fact, you can actually get really greedy with Shadowheart's attribute selection here, and take 17 wisdom and 15 dexterity to start with. This doesn't give you an initial bonus, but this allows you to, at level 4, go up to 16 and 18, and is almost certainly the most optimized way to play if you really just want to min-max everything. If you don't, though, and for this build, which is sort of more intended as a general purpose guide, I recommend putting 12 points in strength, because that will give you more carry weight and jump distance, and make your playthrough just like more fun and smoother if you're not having to constantly move items off of your cleric because she's wearing heavy armor and is getting tired all the time. So just to reiterate that really quickly, for a purely min-maxed attribute spread, you want 15, 16, 17, and for a more general purpose spread, you want 12, 14, 16, 8, 16, 8. We're going to go with that. Our skill selection mostly doesn't matter for clerics, although it is worth, if you are building a custom cleric, taking a background that gives you, or race or background that gives you perception checks. Clerics by default don't get these, and perception's very important, and also is based on your wisdom rolls. So clerics with naturally incredible wisdom will benefit very highly from their high perception attribute, and will allow your party to spot hidden enemies and traps much more easily if you can get access to perception. Other than that, it doesn't really matter what you take, because your cleric is unlikely to be your main conversationalist and is not going to be starting conversations, so you don't really need the charisma skills, and otherwise doesn't get access to things like stealth or sleight of hand that you'd be using outside of combat, so you can take skills mostly based on flavor. Finally, we have to select our cantrips, because these are some of the most important things that you are going to do with your spellcaster at level 1. This is our main combat option, as well as our main utility, and one of the best things about clerics is the incredible cantrips that they get. The first and foremost among these, and basically mandatory for every party, is guidance. What plus 1d4 to skill checks, ability checks that you can make, and you can do this out of combat. It's free, so every conversation you're in, every skill check you're in, you can use guidance. The game will prompt you to roll it, and will add to it, and this will convert hundreds of failed rolls into successes over the course of the game. Guidance may be the single best spell in Baldur's Gate 3, and is absolutely mandatory for every party, in my opinion. It's incredibly fun to use as well, so you definitely want guidance. We also need a main combat spell, and so we're going to choose between either Sacred Flame or Produce Flame. If you are on console, I recommend taking Sacred Flame because the Produce Flame casting interface on console is terrible. But on PC, you should probably take Produce Flame because it's just a little bit more powerful. It gives you a light as well as a weapon, so it means that you then don't have to take light. But on console, I think Sacred Flame works better because the casting interface for Produce Flame is apparently awful on console. That being said, Produce Flame slightly better as a pick and will be your main damage source. This is going to be your main weapon. You throw the fire using your wisdom, so it's going to hit pretty regularly. Lets you set the ground on fire, light the area, so it also has a ton of utility. For our third cantrip slot, we actually have a couple choices. You can take Resistance, because there's some story events where it's pretty good, or you can take Blade Ward for times when you get into an emergency and just need to defend yourself for a couple turns, or times when you're trying to protect temporary hit points and stuff you might have. I'm going to suggest taking Blade Ward, but don't use this as a default action in combat. Use it only when you need your character to survive for an extra turn so that reinforcements can show up, or if you have gotten yourself in a bad position and are surrounded by a lot of enemies. Normally, this is a bad action if you're just compared to just doing damage, but there are times when Blade Ward comes up, so I think it is, and when it's good, it's very good, so it's worth having in those circumstances. Alright, that is our level 1 build for a Cleric. Let's move on to level 2. At character level 2, Clerics get additional class and subclass abilities. In this case, because we're a Tempest Cleric, we get Destructive Wrath. So whenever we roll Thunder or Lightning damage, we can use our Channel Divinity, which we get 1 of per short rest currently, to deal maximum damage instead. This is good for 2 reasons. 1, it increases our damage when we're doing Thunder and Lightning damage, and 2, it makes our damage very reliable, so we know exactly how much damage we're going to be dealing with a spell or effect that deals this type of damage and can plan accordingly. An enemy at 8 hit points, you know you have an exactly 8 damage attack. That is very useful to be able to guarantee that you take them out of the fight. For our spell list, and I should mention, of course, what our default prepared spells are going to be, you are going to want to go with Healing Word, which is a bonus action that allows you to heal allies. This is especially useful if an ally has dropped to 0 hit points in combat and is making death saves. It'll get them back on their feet instantly and doesn't cost you your action. We also want Bless, which is one of the best things for us to be doing in the early game, concentrating on Bless on ourselves and our allies, whichever allies are making attack rolls. Bless is incredible. Remember when I said Guidance is going to convert hundreds of skill checks to skill check failures to successes? Bless is exactly the same thing for attack rolls, and is going to massively improve the effectiveness of your party if you spend your turns concentrating on it in the early game. So we want those two as great support options. We also want Command, because Command is one of the best control spells in the entire game. It will remain relevant all game for Clerics, because if you command an enemy to drop, if you use Command Drop on an enemy, they will fall to the ground and lose their next turn, which is going to give your allies advantage on attacks against them, and also is going to prevent them from spending a turn. Trading your turn for an enemy turn is typically a pretty good trade because you can decide when to use it, and so being able to do this with Command means that you can take powerful bosses out of the fight and completely one-shot encounters, because you're going to take an enemy out of the fight, have advantage on all your attacks, and by the time they get their next turn, they're going to be dead. Next up, we are going to want to have Sanctuary, which is also a bonus action like Healing Word, and prevents enemies from attacking the targeted ally. This isn't concentration, which is notable because it means you can have it while concentrating on Bless, so you can use it to protect your Bless concentration, or you can just use it to protect an out-of-position ally, and it's a great panic button if somebody gets into trouble. Finally, we want a good combat spell, and we're going to take Guiding Bolt. Guiding Bolt's a great ranged attack, and if you just really want one enemy dead, it does the job reasonably well. It's not as good a nuke as you will have from other characters at this level, but it's a pretty solid damaging element to add to your party. I like Guiding Bolt more than Inflict Wounds, even though Inflict Wounds does more damage, just because I think that the range adds a little bit more flexibility to the spell. At Cleric level 3, we get access to level 2 spells, and we also get Shatter and Gust of Wind from our Tempest Cleric levels. These spells will always be prepared. These two aren't going to be ones that come up that often, although Shatter, when you can maximize the damage, is going to do 24 damage with Shatter, plus your Channel Divinity charge, and 24 damage in an AoE is a pretty solid amount of damage that you can really use to bring down low enemies or take down a group pretty easily. For our other prepared spells, we are going to... The only one that we're adding from level 2 at this level is going to be Spiritual Weapon, which is another bonus action, so you can use it and another thing in this, and Command, or use it and Bless in the same turn, which is incredibly useful. Spiritual Weapon is great for blocking doorways, distracting enemies, adding a little bit of extra damage to your party. Its disadvantage is that it's slow, but if you can place it next to enemies who can't attack anything else, they'll often get distracted by it, or if you can place it next to enemies who are trying to go through a doorway or blocked up by an entangle or some other spell that's stopping them from moving, it's going to add solid DPS and absorb hits that otherwise your party would be taking. By default, your sort of normal combat mode in for a cleric is going to be to spend turn 1 of a fight casting Bless and Spiritual Weapon, or even casting Bless before combat starts, and then spending turn 1 casting Spiritual Weapon and Command. And then you'll command an enemy, and then you will just plink with your Produce Flame for the rest of combat while your Spiritual Weapon beats down enemies. Cleric's play pattern is going to be to use a powerful concentration spell to win the fight, and then spend the rest of the time playing cleanup and helping out their allies who are doing damage with weapon attacks. That's one of the things that makes this character so powerful, is that you get to do that, unload all of your best spells in the first turn of combat by having all of those options available. At Cleric level 4, we get our first feat, which is going to allow us to increase our wisdom. And this is great because it's just going to increase the save DCs that enemies are rolling against, so our command will be more effective, we'll hit more often with our attacks, and so on. If you took the 15, 16, 17 split, then you would even those out and have 16 dexterity at this point. But just increasing our wisdom is going to be the best pick here as well. A couple other options if you are looking for something else to do, although I do think that increasing your wisdom is the best. You could take Warcaster if you're losing concentration on spells a lot by getting hit. Warcaster saves you from doing that. And you could take Alert to guarantee that you go first in combat. This is especially useful on Honor mode, although I tend to like doing that at later levels, but Alert even at level 4 can be extremely powerful as well. We also get an additional cantrip, and we're just going to take Resistance, which is very useful in certain story events in late Act 1 and in Act 2, so it's just very nice to have that available. At character level 5, we get access to 3rd level spells, and this is what makes Clerics, and especially Tempest Clerics, so powerful. Clerics' 3rd level spells are incredible, some of the best in the game, and that's saying a lot because 3rd level spells in general are where a lot of characters really hit their power spike. We get some of the best control spells and some of the best damage spells, and as well as the best support spell in the game, all at once at this level. By being a Tempest Cleric, we get access to Call Lightning, which we can concentrate on and just do very solid damage, just great, consistent damage, every turn of combat. So if combat's going to go long, this is a great one to use, and you'll usually want to do this if you want to stay away from enemies. We also get Sleet Storm, which is a 30-foot radius AoE, an enormous AoE that makes an ice surface. Ice surfaces in Baldur's Gate are incredibly powerful, because if an enemy falls over, they lose their turn. If they are walking on the ice surface and fall over, they just skip the rest of their turn. This makes it a gigantic AoE stun that you can apply to every enemy in a combat for turn after turn after turn by concentrating on Sleet Storm, as well as interrupting enemy spellcaster casts. There's also a lot of really cool tricks you can do with Sleet Storm, but the big thing is just that it knocks over every enemy and completely wipes encounters all on its own. We also get to prepare a couple great spells, and the spells that we are going to prepare at this level is going to be Glyph of Warding, which you can cast directly onto an enemy. It looks like it's supposed to be a sort of trap, but you can cast it onto an enemy. It'll trigger immediately. This lets you do elemental damage of any type or put a bunch of enemies to sleep, so it's both control and damage in the same spell. We also want Mass Healing Word, which is great because we will probably have items that buff our allies when we heal them, and this lets us apply those buffs to every ally at once. And we want Spirit Guardians. Spirit Guardians is some of the best sustained damage in the game. It just does constant damage to every enemy that's surrounding the cleric, and when you move around the battlefield, every enemy will take damage, which is why movement options are so helpful, and that's going to be one of the best things to concentrate on, just constantly dealing damage. At this level, your play pattern is going to shift a little bit to choosing between your 3 super powerful concentration spells. In Spirit Guardians, if you want to do damage up close, Call Lightning from your Tempest Cleric levels if you want to do damage at a distance, or Sleet Storm if you want to control a large group of enemies. And of course, the play pattern of casting Bless and supporting your allies is still extremely powerful as well. At this point, you have a ton of different options, and you can adopt different strategic postures depending on the encounter to do exactly what you want to do. At Cleric level 6, we get Thunderbolt Strike, which allows us to push enemies if we do thunder or lightning damage to them. The cool thing about this is that this doesn't take an action of any kind and works from any source of lightning damage we do, including a pool of water that we've electrified. So if you have a big pool of water on the ground, which you can make because you're a cleric with Create Water, and then hit it with electricity damage, then this damage will count for the Thunderbolt Strike, and enemies walking in that pool of electricity will get ping-ponged all over the map, preventing them from doing anything at all. It's also very funny. So this is actually an extremely powerful ability. It also works really well with your retaliation damage that you have from being a Tempest Cleric, so when you get attacked, you can do the reaction damage to them, push the enemy backwards. You can also use it to push enemies off of cliffs if they're standing near cliff edges, get additional push distance from stuff like Thunder Wave. It's just a super powerful and versatile ability, and because it's passive and always on, it's extremely helpful. For prepared spells at this level, we are probably going to add in a utility spell like Create Water, which is very useful to have as well. One thing to note as well on a cleric is that you have the ability to swap out your spells at any point out of combat, so you can trade out your spell list based on what you think the scenario is going to be when you're going into a fight or a social encounter or whatever. If you know there's a skill check you really want to make, you can prepare Enhance Ability. If you know that you need to remove a disease or poison, you can prepare Lesser Restoration. You can swap those out during the day and do all kinds of things as a result. If you're going up against spellcasters, you can bring Silence to that encounter. I'm just giving you kind of a solid default spell list, but there's lots of different options, and cleric spells are so good that you should definitely experiment with using different ones. At Cleric level 7, we get access to some more incredible spells. Freedom of Movement is great to have just always prepared, because it's not one that you're going to use all the time, but when an ally gets stunned, it's a great panic button to have to break them out of it. We also get Ice Storm, which does a bunch of damage and creates another ice surface, just like with Sleet Storm, and that is going to, again, knock over a bunch of enemies while doing very solid damage to them. For our prepared spells at this level, we get to add in a couple more powerful spells, and the one that I'm going to recommend bringing is Guardian of Faith, because Guardian of Faith makes an enormous summoned ally with 60 hit points that does damage every time an enemy enters its area. The big thing about this is that it's big, and it can really block doorways and prevent enemy movement very effectively, as well as just a great ratio of damage to spell level. It's a level 4 spell, and it'll do 60 damage, and you can also increase its longevity by casting Aid or Warding Bond on it, spells that we get at level 2, to keep it alive for longer, but for the most part it's just going to do amazing damage and block up enemy movement very well. It doesn't take your concentration, so you can cast it before combat or cast it during combat, as well as concentrating on something else. It also can't fall over or anything like that, so you can have it in a Sleet Storm and just be hitting prone enemies with it every turn. It's got a lot of very powerful abilities. At Cleric level 8, we get access to another feat, as well as Divine Strike Thunder. We are not going to be making melee attacks that often. Clerics, this version of a Cleric is much more spellcasting oriented, so the Divine Strike is not going to come up that often, because you would much rather be using your cantrip spells or your just normal spells in order to do damage than make weapon attacks. So I wouldn't recommend using this too frequently, although it is worth noting that clerics can use a crossbow in the early game. If you have a light crossbow, you can use that, and you'll have okay dexterity, so you'll hit. Sometimes it'll be better to do that than to use your cantrip spell. For our feat here, I am going to say, if you're on honor mode, you should definitely get alert. It's extremely useful. You maybe should have gotten it at level 4, but certainly by level 8, you should pick up alert, because going first is so important on honor mode. If you aren't on honor mode, I'm going to recommend taking Warcaster at this level. Our save DCs should be pretty decent with 18 wisdom, and we should have some gear that improves our save DC by this point, so we don't need the +2 wisdom as much. And if you are finding that you're dropping concentration a lot, Warcaster will solve that problem by giving you advantage on the roll alongside your 16 con. And so for players who are a little newer to the game and not used to just winning fights before enemies get to act, Warcaster is incredibly valuable there as well. So it's between those two feats, depending on sort of whether you find you're dropping concentration a lot or not, but by default we're going to take Warcaster here. Not tough, Warcaster. At Cleric level 9, we get one more amazing spell from Tempest Cleric, and this one is only available to Tempest or Light Clerics, which is one of the reasons that those are some of the most powerful domains. Destructive Wave is a great spell because it does great damage, just 5d6 Thunder plus 5d6 Radiant in an AoE, and it doesn't hurt your allies. You can cast it in the middle of a melee, and it won't hit your allies, just enemies, and it knocks enemies prone while doing thunder and radiant damage. Those are very relevant damage types because you can maximize the thunder damage, and radiant damage will apply radiating orbs, which is a super powerful item effect that you can get on a cleric, as well as thunder applying reverberation, something else that you can use. So these are incredibly relevant damage types. As well, almost nothing resists thunder damage, so it's just very useful to have access to that as well. And it's just good damage, knocks enemies prone, which is an extremely powerful effect, doesn't hurt your allies, just a great spell overall. An excellent action if you have a 5th level spell prepared. A 5th level spell available. For your other 5th level spells, you're mostly going to be using those to cast higher level versions of lower level spells. So your other 5th level spell slots other than Destructive Wave are mostly going to go into casting Spirit Guardians at this point, because a 5th level Spirit Guardians is tons of damage, and it is going to really improve the damage. Similarly, you can do the same with Call Lightning to improve the damage of that effect as well. You're also likely going to want Aid on this character. You can use a character that stays in camp to cast Aid, but Aid is just a nice boost to your whole party, and if cast with a 4th level spell slot, gives you plus 20 hit points on everyone, which is just a great boost to your survivability. Also, if you've found good save DC gear, you can use Hold Person. There's a lot of encounters where if you can land this, it just instantly wins because of the automatic critical hits that it grants to your allies. Another option here is Banishment, because Banishment is a spell that targets an enemy's charisma saving throw. A lot of bosses have very low charisma saves, and so targeting them with Banishment means that you're basically guaranteed to hit them, and some bosses, if you can remove them for 2 turns and kill their allies, you win the encounter outright with Banishment there. So those are a couple spells that are worth keeping in mind at this point in the game. At Cleric level 10, we get access to Divine Intervention. Once per game, your Cleric can use this to gain a super powerful effect. You can cheese this by respeccing and stuff, but at least in theory, it's once per game. The mace that this gives you is very useful for your Cleric, because the healing aura that mace grants you is actually pretty nice, and will probably be your best in-slot weapon to have throughout the game at this point, just because it heals you constantly. It can allow you to apply the buff on heal items to your whole party without spending a spell on it, so it's very useful to do that as well. There's a bunch of other weapons that are good, but honestly, cleric weapons are not the most important things in general. What weapon you use is going to impact you significantly less than your other itemization, and also cleric is just such a powerful character in it. Just the base class is so powerful that items are not critical to cleric's success anyways. But I think that the divine intervention for the weapon is still going to improve your party overall pretty significantly. For a cantrip selection, by this point you should definitely have sorted out like your light sources and everything, so it doesn't really matter what we take here, just take whatever you want for flavor. And then at level 11, we get access to 6th level spells, which are some of the obviously most powerful spells in the entire game. And clerics have 3, I think 2 that are really good, and 3 that are worth mentioning in terms of 6th level spells. The best of the 6th level spells for clerics is Hero's Feast. When cast on your whole party, it makes them all immune to Frightened, gives them additional hit points, and these hit points stack with the hit points that you get from Aid, and gives you advantage on wisdom saves. This protects your party from some of the most dangerous encounters in the late game. There are encounters that you just will instantly lose if you don't have immunity to fear and fail your wisdom saves, and Hero's Feast totally solves that problem all by itself. It lasts all day. Absolutely a great use of a 6th level spell slot. However, you can have a camp follower cast Hero's Feast, and so another option is to use Planar Ally. The Deva that you get from Planar Ally is one of the best effects in the game as well, one of the best summons in the game. It's not as powerful as the elemental Myrmidons that wizards and druids get, but still the second most powerful summon in the game is the Deva, and it is going to give you a ton of extra damage and tanking for your party. The Jinni that you can get as well is also very good just because it has a massive amount of hit points, so it will survive pretty easily as well. Finally, if you want a damage option, Blade Barrier's okay. I think in general you're better off with one of these other two. Planar Ally will typically do more damage, but if you know there's an AoE fight that you have that's coming up, you can use Blade Barrier. By default, the best option is going to be Hero's Feast, but if you're getting that elsewhere or refreshing your spell slot with an item that lets you cast 2 6th level spells in a day, then the Deva is going to be really good as well. And finally, at Cleric level 12, if you're staying monoclassed, we are going to pick up our last 2 points of Wisdom, maximizing our Wisdom and making sure that our save DCs are as high as possible. For our final prepared spell list, we're going to again drop Cure Wounds and Death Ward. Those spells are pretty bad, and bring back in some more situational spells that we might need for various situations. Lesser Restoration is often good to have around, and maybe we want to go all the way back and pick up something like, we don't currently have Hold Person prepared. It's also useful to have Enhance Ability prepared at this point, because at level 12 there's a couple story events that you're really going to want to pass skill checks for, so having Enhance Ability prepared can let you use that if it comes up. I think that people tend to cast this spell a little too often, because there's not a lot of skill checks in the game that are worth spending a level 2 spell slot to slightly improve your chance at succeeding on, but there are some that are really, really worth it, so having it available is always good. This is our Cleric build, and I will talk about potential multiclassing and items, but overall, what Clerics give you are an enormous amount of control and utility, as well as great tanking abilities, thanks to their extremely high armor class, and distracting enemies using Spiritual Weapon and Guardian of Faith, so you can lock down a whole group of enemies with your various spell selection, deal incredible damage, and also debuff enemies in some of the most powerful ways in the game. This spell selection allows you to do that, and I think is a great spell list to have by default. For items for our Cleric, there's a lot that you can benefit from, and I'm going to give you both some specific items that I think are really powerful on Clerics, as well as general rules for when you're picking items. Obviously, the game has thousands of items, so your loadout is going to change significantly over the course of your playthrough, and so it's best that you have the tools to pick good items for yourself. First up, we're going to talk about one of the best item sets for Clerics, the buff on heal items. This is the Hellrider's Pride, the Whispering Promise, and the Boots of Aid and Comfort, all available early in Act 1, and when worn, this will allow your party to gain Blade Ward, Bless, and 3 temporary hit points every time you cast a healing spell on them. With Mass Healing Word, this is your entire party and is going to be an enormous amount of buffing for your party members over the course of the game. Bless is going to make sure they hit more regularly, and Blade Ward will make them take half damage from just about everything, and so that is going to be a significant boost to your party. This item set is incredible for Clerics. Secondly, a type of item that is really good for Clerics is going to be anything that does Radiating Orb. You'll be doing a lot of radiant damage because you're going to be casting Spirit Guardians on radiant damage and doing radiant damage with it every single turn. When you do radiant damage and stack a radiant orb on an enemy, they take a -1 penalty to attack rolls for each remaining turn. So if you have multiple of these items that give radiating orb and can stack it up pretty quickly, enemies will almost instantly lose their ability to do anything because they will have such enormous penalties to their attack rolls that they will never be able to land hits. In this way, you can walk next to enemies with Spirit Guardians or use other sources of radiant damage like Destructive Wrath to do a massive amount of debuffing as well as the great damage that you're doing consistently as well. For our Tempest Cleric, we're also just going to want a great, just the best suit of heavy armor that we can find. Pretty much just whatever has the highest armor class is going to be good, although I'm also quite partial to this Dwarven Splint Mail. I think this is one of the best suits of armor in the game and will last you throughout most of the game, because the bonus to Constitution gives you extra hit points as well as keeping your concentration spells be more reliable. You also want a shield. Again, you're looking for the highest armor class in the game, but you're also looking for shields with cool special effects, like increasing your save DCs, like this one, or increasing your initiative, like this one. Any items that increase your save DCs or your initiative are premium value for Clerics, because those are some of the most important things that they will have, that most important stats that they can possibly use, and so any items that do that are going to benefit your Clerics massively. So you basically, to sum up, you're looking for the buff on heal items are great specific items, and then you want the armor with the highest armor class, the shield with the highest armor class, and any other items that improve your armor class, because your Cleric will just be able to then just not get hit, which is obviously great, especially when you're running around in melee a lot of the time. You also want items that improve your spell DC so that your spells are more reliable, and you want items that improve your initiative so that you can land your spells before enemies go. If you use the Divine Intervention to gain a weapon, you get the Devotee's Mace, which gives you this healing incense aura. This gives you as a bonus action and gives you basically a healing word, a mass healing word every turn for 10 turns, which works incredibly well with these items to apply all of these effects every turn for 10 turns, which is obviously awesome. And another specific kind of item that you should be looking for is something that gives you access to Misty Step, because Misty Step is a spell that Clerics normally do not get, and it's a get out of jail free card if you get into a bad situation or just need to get up onto high ground. I think every character in the game should try to get access to Misty Step if at all feasible, because it's just such a powerful effect and will make your character much safer. So overall, armor class, save DC, and initiative, those are the things that you care about on Clerics, as well as the very powerful buff on heal items, and Radiating Orb if you want to cheese out bosses by reducing their attack rolls to 0. Finally, just a quick word on multiclassing. If you want to stay mostly a Cleric, there is still one level dip that is extremely worth mentioning. And that is taking your very first level of your character in Sorcerer. The reason for this is that Sorcerers get Constitution save proficiency, which means that you can then skip Warcaster on your Cleric, because you'll have way better concentration saves. And you get access to a bunch of Sorcerer utility, including the very powerful Shield spell and Magic Missile, which are both very useful to have on just about every character, and some great additional cantrips as well. Stuff like Minor Illusion and Mage Hand are very useful as well, and you can take True Strike to annoy everyone in the YouTube comments, which is always extremely valuable. Plus, if you take Storm Sorcery, then whenever you cast a spell, you get to fly as a bonus action, which gives you an enormous amount of mobility. So if you really want to optimize this build and are looking and would have taken Warcaster of the feats that I mentioned, then it can almost always be correct to take Sorcerer as your first level instead, and then build this Cleric build with the next 11 levels in Cleric, using exactly the same setup that I mentioned as well. You'll still hit 20 Wisdom, you'll still get heavy armor and shield proficiency because those actually come from your Cleric subclass, not your Cleric class, so as soon as you take Tempest Cleric, you'll still get the armor and shield proficiencies, and so you won't lose anything from taking Sorcerer. It's a very powerful dip and allows you to fly, as well as defend yourself even better because you have the shield spell and that can increase your already very high AC up into the stratosphere. Alright, my friends, I hope that you've enjoyed this look at the Tempest Cleric, the best cleric in Baldur's Gate 3, in my opinion, and a mainstay in many, many honor mode parties, as well as every other party. And if you've been looking to get Shadowheart to really start kicking butt, then this is the place to start. As always, if you've enjoyed the video, of course, feel free to leave a comment and like the video. Both of those things help me out a ton with the algorithm, and I do read every comment I get and appreciate people who take the time to do that. I wish I could still answer them all, but unfortunately, fortunately, I now get enough that I can't always answer them all, but I do read them all and really appreciate everyone who takes the time. And of course, you can subscribe to my channel for more build guides and other strategy game content. Cheers, my friends. I'll catch you next time.